episode of the Skift Meetings podcast. I'm Miguel Neves, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Skift Meetings. For this episode, I have the opportunity to speak with Mathias Sondermann, the Senior Director of Events at SAP. And in our conversation, we start by talking about how events used to be more logistics-driven, and the COVID pandemic really forced events to look at technology and virtual as an asset rather than a checkbox. We also talk about AI and how it's driving event engagement, and that is very exciting for Mathias. He's looking to increase the value of every touch point at events, and he talks about creating a target audience of one. He talks about how giving attendees choice is so important when we think about the future of events. And he talks about breaking out from silos and how every event professional really, when they understand the overall event strategy, then they can do much more than they can if they don't. And we talk about how events are so important because brands and companies are looking for moments of emotion. And finally, Mathias shares some of his thoughts about dealing with stress, how he deals with it personally, but also how he's helped his organization and the people that work in this organization deal with stress better. I hope you enjoy this episode, and don't forget to check out the other episodes of the Skift Meetings podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Skift Meetings podcast. I'm delighted that you're here listening with us. And today, joining us is Mathias Sondermann, the Senior Director of Events at SAP. Mathias, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mathias, we've known each other for, I think, something like 10 years, maybe 8 years, something like that. I think through our participation in the ECM summer school. I think that was where we connected. But I'd love you to share just your journey as an event professional. And I'd love you to start from the point of where you first kind of met events or understood events, and kind of tell us a little bit about how your career evolved from that point.
I think my first interaction with events was when I was working in an agency, and it was an agency group with different marketing disciplines. And I started my career as a consultant for B2B marketing communication. So especially sales focused, right? So as a German marketer in an agency, you usually work with the automotive industry. And, you know, we had several clients from the German automotives, and we did like sales support, brochures, workshops, blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff. Even some classical marketing, like advertising and so on. But part of it was, since we were looking at holistic marketing programs, were incentives, right? And this agency group also had an events piece branch to it. And that was my first encounter when I started to work with the colleagues who, as part of a program for a client, they were looking at the incentive piece, or when an event or the incentive were at the center of what they were doing, then we would probably sometimes help with communication, like writing invitation letters and, you know, doing a little campaign around the events. That was my first encounter. And I found, and that's probably interesting enough, you know, when I looked at it, oh my God, that's something I'd never want to do.
Okay, tell us more.
Yeah, I found it like, oh, these guys were always so stressed, right? They were working day and night. They were, you know, calling customers on the phone, receiving faxes. Yes, it was still fax times, and put it all in the lists. And, you know, they were, and went on site, and I felt like, oh my God, this must be so stressful. But then, I mean, of course, you get in closer touch with it, right? And then as soon as I was actually participating in the first event on site myself, it opened up like a whole new world to me. And I thought, oh my God, like you can have such an impact. You can make such an impression on people, you know, with the classical marketing programs that I was working on before. I could never do that. I could never create these emotions with people, like, you know, happy or angry, right? Depending on how well you do the job. And then that caught me. So from hating it, I went to loving it and stayed with it.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And so tell us a little bit more about kind of the evolution of your career from this point onwards.
Yeah, I started, I started in an agency. I stayed in that agency group, just went to the event side of it. And started with like supporting larger programs and projects, to then owning my own larger projects as the agency representative with a customer, onto becoming a key account manager for one or two of these customers, and looking at portfolios of events and entire programs. After a couple of years, I switched sides and went into a company, corporate customer, and started to work in the IT industry for an IT company called SAS. Their European headquarters were in Heidelberg in Germany, so that was like an easy commute for me. But it showed me the different side of things, right? Whereas in an agency, you're looking at fulfilling customer needs mainly. Like a customer drives the strategy and tells you, like, we have this and this content, but here's how we want you to execute the program. Switching the sides meant that I had to focus on like the other side of the things that looked so easy from an agency perspective, right? But understanding, what is it that we want to tell? How do we want to get this across? What is how do we get the budget to do that, etc.? Was really, really interesting. And after a couple of years with this IT industry, I switched and went to SAP, a larger corporate in Germany and active worldwide. And again, built my career there from, again, like leading portions of events to leading the large programs that SAP runs, Sapphire, TechEd, and others, to leading the team that led those programs, to now looking at standardization of events holistically. Like a long journey, like it, I hate to say, but it's long, I think more than 20 years of career in like 5 minutes.
That's really impressive. Well, thank you for sharing that. And so your current role at the moment is more overseeing people that are overseeing these large events, if you will.
Not exactly. SAP is a very diverse company, right? So consisting of, like, diverse meaning in the sense of not necessarily super centrally driven. So SAP has a number of board areas, departments, etc., and also coming with that, a number of different events teams and marketing teams that execute events. So my role is now to look at, how do we harmonize that? How do we set standards so that from a customer perspective, SAP appears as a consistent experience, regardless of who and where is planning or executing an event. That's a relatively new function, and we talked already in a previous conversation around building this so-called center of excellence that's supposed to drive this consistency across the company. So in short, like, not involved in planning and executing programs, involved in driving consistent planning and execution and outcomes for events.
Would it be fair to call that a sort of a blend between kind of a brand policing kind of element with also the strategic meetings management element of standardizing meetings across the company?
Yes, the latter piece, yes. The first one, policing, no, but that's driven, I think, mainly by the company culture. Companies are different. This one, as I said, is relatively diverse. So it's more often like, trying to gain the buy-in, the understanding of the different teams, aligning them towards a common goal. So I've learned a lot about, I think, how politicians work and how politics work, more than in the past.
And do you see yourself as an event professional still with your current role, or do you see yourself as more of like a technology professional because of the parent company being a technology company?
Definitely more event professional, but trending towards more becoming a holistic marketeer, because I feel like, but I think we'll get to that at a later stage in this conversation as well. Events are evolving out of their silo currently.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, let's go there now. I mean, I'm happy to
Mm-hmm.
jump all over the place wherever the conversation goes. So you see yourself
Yeah,
as event marketing, you see events kind of coming out of their shell in a way. Tell us more. Like, do you have a kind of a theory, your own theory about this? Or are you kind of picking up on different senses? What's giving you that feeling?
I think that events used to be, and that's, I think, based on my personal observations, but um, also learned in many, many conversations that I had with peers and colleagues around the world. Events used to be more logistics driven, mostly logistics driven. As I said, like, from my agency times, you're told like this is what's happening, and then you can get a little creative in how you want to get that across and how you build the logistics around it and how where you do it, etc. But it's all you know very much focused on getting people from A to B, creating a great experience for them at that moment in time. Um, I think the pandemic in this case helped to catalyze the evolution of events because it forced, and that's, I think that was one of the driving factors. It forced events to more look at technology and virtual as an asset rather than just a checkbox. So, to give a practical example, in the past, the virtual program or virtual piece of a program used to be, okay, we will stream the keynote, or even worse, we will record the keynote and we'll put it on a company repository that people can sign up to and look at the recording if they didn't have the time to attend the keynote. Now in the pandemic, virtual became the program, and that opened up a whole new perspective on events for, I think, the majority of event planners and event professionals. And with that, they, events suddenly became part of a virtual or technology-driven customer journey. All of the other marketing tactics were already there. Like, you could see social media was on, has been on the rise for years now, and talking to customers, reaching customers into communication channels, etc., in social media had already happened for a number of years. Classical advertising was happening on screen, in the web, in social media, etc. Like, wherever you look at all the other marketing tactics, they were already technology embedded. Events, not so much. Now they became technology embedded, and suddenly, it was much easier to integrate an event into a holistic customer journey. And the expectation for companies to do so and create this seamless experience from, hey, customer, you just learned about our name. Now we'll show you what we sell on our website. Now you can, talk to an expert if you book a meeting online. To now we'll get you to our event to talk in person and understand more, and maybe bring the team together to discuss how we can solve your problem. To later on, okay, here's a signing of a contract and here's renewals and all of this. Now events had the chance of becoming much more seamlessly integrated into that. And I think that's the biggest change that I've seen. And that's why just looking at the logistics of a single event is not going to be enough in the future. We need to take a look at an understanding, where does a customer come from? Where does the company want the customer to go? And how can this event that is no longer a standalone thing help advance people through this journey?
Very interesting. You frame that very much as a client event kind of format. Do you feel that the same thing applies to other types of events, internal events, association events, other things like that?
Yes, because like people, as a person, you don't, and as a participant, you don't really make the difference, right? You can be at an event and you are a customer, and you can go to an event and you're an employee, but you're still a person, right? And if the experiences that you make at one of those events where it is very seamlessly integrated and there's follow-up, like pre-communication, follow-up communication and action, and the event is just part of the journey, that sticks with you personally. So your expectations change. So as most of the events that we do, of course, are customer related, um, I think that other events and disciplines may not be necessarily be at the forefront because customer events are the core of what we do, but we'll have to follow if they want to be successful continuously and sustainably.
Interesting. And this is very much talking to that element of event marketing, right? And that kind of transition into event marketing. We've been kind of covering a lot of trends, and event marketers essentially kind of being forced or being very kind of bullish on events. This idea that with a lot of also kind of quite invasive digital technology being more limited, more privacy concerns, events being a high touch format, being more attractive to marketers. Is that also part of the equation? And yeah, I kind of get the sense that events, because they were more logistics and because they're more unique and more kind of physically, active, and you have to move things around, they're a little harder to standardize. But at the same time, I kind of see that is their magic and their appeal in a way. Is it kind of the winning tactic or the winning strategy for marketers going forward, or has it always been there and we're just kind of refining it to be even better now and even more kind of data points and making it more streamlined, if you will?
Definitely the latter one. I think the importance of events is not going to shrink. Instead, I think it's going to be they're going to become even more important. I think they already are than they were. Let's use the pandemic as kind of the great differentiator. Because in my perspective, they used to be more in a silo, and I'm not saying they were entirely in a silo, but they were looked at as special, like separate tactic that would talk to people in person. They've now become just more versatile and more integrated. However, the core of it, like, the thing that made me want to do events, like the emotion, the impact that you can make, the human connection, the engagement, those are things that just events can create. And if you integrate those events better with other tactics and into a customer journey, they will become even more powerful and will contribute more to the entire journey than as just something that is happening at one moment in time.
What about measuring the success of these events? Because you mentioned this emotion. I've heard some people, ROI is a big term in the industry, return on investment. There's also this kind of return on emotion. When
Mm-hmm.
when an event is successful in kind of your way of seeing it, are there things that you're looking for from the people attending or any other signs that kind of tell you that the event was successful? Or are you just waiting for a more kind of factual data measurement to kind of figure that out?
I don't think there's a contradiction necessarily.
Okay, so it's not either or, right? It's maybe and.
Exactly. Exactly. So the different kinds of events that we have, drive reaching different goals, or those events even have, different goals. So, for instance, we have events that are aiming at, growing the pipeline, or closing deals, or educating people, or just, the broadening the reach of the brand, for example. Now, all of these goals can be broken down into individual KPIs that contribute to those goals. And each of those KPIs can be translated into action that you do at an event, that drive a certain emotion, with a participant, and contribute to the goal. And you can, like, we've not trimmed it down to the very end, but I think we're on a path towards that. so you can actually drill down to what are the things, what are the experiences that we need to create or want to create that appeal to the audience that we're trying to attract and then have at the event, and at the same time, support the goals that we want to reach. So whereas, joy, feeling, the feeling of joy at an event, or something that I fancy also very much, like the feeling of belonging, that makes events successful. They are hard to measure. But I think you can just, for instance, ask people. So there's a way of, them telling you, I enjoy being at this event. I feel belonging. But you can also look at, post-event behavior. How are they talking about the company, about the event? How are they interacting with the company, with the event? Are they doing the things that show that they've maybe become more loyal or, positive towards the brand or a certain product, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ways to measure it. And I think, we'll have more ways of measuring it even better in the future.
What about looking back at your kind of career? Are there any events that stand out for you as ones that you think were particularly successful or, had a real impact on you? And if you could, if you have any that you can share, if you could explain kind of why you think that is or what gave you that kind of impression.
Mm. Um, SAP Sapphire 2010, I think was for me, and I'm just thinking, it was a the first connected hybrid event that I was honored to run. It was a program that was happening simultaneously in Frankfurt in Europe and in Orlando in the United States. We created an overlapping agenda, and we shared keynotes that were live on stage in Germany or in the US and then streamed to the other side of the world. Um, and that in 2010 was like a really, I would say, ambitious undertaking. Um, like the bandwidth and the technology that we currently have wasn't that easily to acquire. Like we used satellite technology to stream. Um, that was really interesting, but it was a huge success, and the energy between teams and continents running an event simultaneously at the same time was just amazing. I don't think I've necessarily ever seen a team so focused, so dedicated, so engaged, so happy to run something so innovative at 14, almost 14 years ago now. So yeah, that was a cool experience, and I think there may still be documentaries of and making ofs of that available, I think, on YouTube or so. That was really, really cool.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about technology.
Hmm.
Obviously, SAP being a technology company, you've mentioned technology quite a few times in your event. Um, what's your general approach to technology when it comes to events? Is it something that you get really involved in, and how do you think about technology at your events or at the events that you run in the past? But I know you're kind of doing a lot of other things now.
Hmm. I see technology as a great tool and enabler. Um, like there's technology that helps you drive the basic bread and butter um, of an event, right? So registration technology, for example. Um, but there's more sophisticated technology as well, um, that helps you drive kind of what makes events really special. So um, engagement, inclusion, all of these kinds of stuff. And I think um, with the rise of AI right now, we're just at the start of starting to understand what the possibilities of technology will be in the future and how we can use that to make positive impacts with events.
Are there any particular pieces of event related technology that you're excited about, or that you're kind of playing with or experimenting with, that you'd like to talk about? Or if we want to jump on AI, that's fine too. But I didn't want to just jump on AI necessarily.
Mhm. I think, yeah, the I've now spent more time to think about AI than I have at maybe evolving other kinds of technology. I mean, of course, there are, this hybrid technology of, including webcasts, for instance, into an event agenda in hybrid meetings where some people are in the room and some are remote. So all of these things are, really cool, but, have been practiced and now integrated over the last 3 or 4 years pretty well, I feel. AI is really, can be a game changer in many ways, and I think in ways that are that we maybe don't even understand yet. If I can talk a little bit about AI, just in end of last year, October, I think last year, I was in an event format, the so-called EBX lab, run by the German Convention Bureau and the Fraunhofer Institute, to basically evaluate AI and come to pretty, um, tangible use cases of AI for events specifically in the future. And it was really like we spent 2 days in workshops, and the German Convention Bureau has just now published a white paper around this, about the outcomes of this workshop. But just by talking to each other and starting to brainstorm a little bit around what the options of AI are, they became so breathtaking and almost endless. But we focused on things that really drive event success, and that was engagement. Where when people feel engaged, when we drive the right engagement, that drives event successes. And when you start to think about how AI can help drive that engagement, you can look at every touch point, for instance, that a customer or a person has with an event, and you can increase the value of that with AI immensely. So, for instance, when you, I think the first touch point that you have with an event is that you learn about an event happening, or you get invited to an event. With AI, there's a way to personalize that very much. So in the past, we used to send, I don't know, faxes, then emails, now invites through social media. Now imagine if you want to get invited, you probably have a preference how you want to be talked to or invited to an event by somebody. Now AI will probably allow us to reach every single person in the way, where, and when they want to be reached in their preferred channel. So the same invite information, for instance, can be going out to person A via an email, and person B via, maybe, I don't know, a direct message in social media, for example, written in a way, in their language, in the way that they want to receive, or like to receive information, in the slang, maybe, if you want. And you can drive that to, like, I'm getting to the event, and how do I want to, for instance, consume content? Keynotes, just as an example, used to be, and still are, big rooms with somebody on stage who's telling a story, and you have an audience sitting there and listening to that, and maybe allowed to ask questions. But is that the way that everybody wants to consume the content? Probably not. So if the content were available, let's say in a content cloud, but you can distribute that content to every single individual in the way that they would like to learn about their content, this is going to be made available and possible through AI. And I think that's a huge step for events, for content consumption, for engagement. Like you can think about every single step along the way, the customer journey at an event, after the event, where I can really make this relevant for this individual person, which will ultimately lead to defining, being able for companies and event planners to create target audiences of one. So every single person will be able to consume and experience an event in their very special individual way. And I think that is, a huge chance for events mixed with the emotions that events can provoke and can give to have a huge impact and even drive engagement much further than what we see today.
Very interesting vision of using AI. A couple of things come to mind when you're saying that. One is the creating a target audience of one. I really like that expression. But is there a danger there that we are then not creating or moving away from shared experiences? Because if everybody wants to consume content or engage or interact in different ways, then we may be kind of reducing the opportunities for those moments. I'm not a big fan of dark rooms and keynotes necessarily, but they do sort of force us into one physical space, and then serendipity happens and things like that. And you do have some of the magic of events tends to happen because you are sometimes forced a little bit out of your comfort zone, if you will. Is there a danger that's not going to happen because everybody can choose how and when they want to interact with the content?
I think choice is the right word. People make a deliberate choice to go to an event for several reasons. And, one of the reasons why people go to an event is because they want to be together with others. And, the feeling of belonging really makes people, makes events successful. So, as you said, choice is the right word. At an event, I have the possibility of interacting with others. I may not always want to, but in the future, I can have the choice. So I'll not miss anything. Like I could theoretically go to an event and just and be with people all day and still get all the information that I need because I say, like, I don't want to sit in the keynote. I'd rather mingle with others. I just love to get the content, and I'd love to get the content in way XYZ at this point in time, and I'll get it. So I'm not missing anything, but I can really focus on experiencing the event in the way that I want. And that's the big difference. So I think we're not creating a vision where everybody sits somewhere with like their goggles on and consuming content through VR lenses and stuff like that, like individual consumption. We will continue to see people interacting with each other, mingling with each other, and like the importance of coming together and creating and experiencing shared experiences has grown over the past years, and especially through the pandemic. But again, I think what AI is going to enable is that choice. Like I can choose who to interact with, but I'm not going to be necessarily missing out on stuff that I want to get.
Makes sense. Are you already experimenting with AI? I mean, or your teams in any way that you can share?
Um, we are at very early stages right now, and as I said, we just started the brainstorming actually together with representatives from other agencies, venues, other corporates, to imagine what it could be. I can't share like what exactly it is that we're looking at in terms of AI for this year, but I think we're looking more at a time frame of maybe 2 years or so, realistically, especially from a European point of view, where like data regulation, etc., is different than in other parts of the world, until we can see a broader use at large events.
Makes sense. Are there any other innovations or trends apart from AI that you're kind of excited about or that you see a really good use for in the near future?
Um, I think just, what I mentioned before, like the integration, the closer integration of events into the entire customer journey and, the marketing tactics, can drive a larger confidence of events too. Um, and maybe the point of view that I have here is not necessarily representative for all companies or all event planners. But as I said in the beginning, like usually, or in the past, event planners were just handed a briefing to maybe be creative about the execution, but didn't really necessarily have that seat at the table when it came to, okay, why are we doing an event? With a closer integration, we now have a seat at the table, and this seat is growing because events are such an important tactic. And I think what comes with that is, or can come with it, and I think maybe that's a deliberate choice of everybody, or companies, or agencies, or others, but I see it happening, that growing confidence and that growth in diversifying what events do and what events can contribute. So the blend of individual pieces of event planning or companies. So just to be precise, I think that's a little bit easier to understand what I mean. Like I met somebody from an AV company last year, but that person was interested, like they usually just bring the sound and the light to, based on a very specific briefing, like we need 5,000 lamps of this making and hanging there and blah. And so they were purely focused on logistics. But this person had just taken over the business together with her brother. She was in her mid-20s, but she was asking questions about event strategy. And I wanted to understand all of that. And she said, look, if I understand more about the strategy of what people want to reach with events, I can much better serve my customer. And I can much better do a service, and I can much better use the equipment that I have, because I can tell them, like, look, if it's that what you're trying to reach, then here is what I suggest you do. And here is the material that I suggest you take to reach your goal. And I see this everywhere in events. And I think that's an emerging trend that's just going to contribute to even better events when people, start to leave their silos and start to interconnect. So it's a common theme that I see around the event industry right now: the diversification, the interest in connecting what I do and as a contribution to events with others, the understanding about that, and evolving the event experience overall.
That sounds very promising. You mentioned the seat at the table, and this is a kind of a recurring topic for us. We've had plenty of podcast guests who have talked about, getting that seat at the table and speaking the language of the C-suite, and kind of how you get there and how you're able to maintain that. I think what you're saying is that with the events becoming more strategic and more standardized, you have a better chance of having that seat at the table. But is there any advice that you'd give to people that are maybe still looking to get that seat at the table, still kind of in that fight? And what would you say to them is kind of the way to get there, or the way to kind of prove the value of that strategic value of events?
I think, well, two things, right? So one thing is be confident, because even if you don't have a seat at the table right now, you will pretty probably get it soon, because the more the time goes by, the better the measurement the measurement is going to be, and the more you will be able to prove the value of the event tactic as part of the overall marketing tactics. The other thing is, I mean, the confidence that we've seen, that we see evolving everywhere in this industry, is going to affect all sorts of the businesses, right? So agencies, corporate companies, etc., they are not existing in a silo. In some companies, it may take a little longer to understand the value of events, but at the same time as we're going to be able to measure it better, um, on the other hand side, the understanding of the importance is going to grow. So you can certainly have that confidence on the one hand side, and on the other hand side, you have security that you will prevail. You will be successful, and you have that seat at the table. Because on the contrary, not giving events as kind of the most emotional and most impactful marketing tactic, not giving them the seat at the table, is not going to be beneficial for companies and their marketing success.
Very interesting. So you've
That may sound, pretty theoretic, but for more concrete advice, everybody can just call me and I can talk through the individual situations.
Matthias
But it's just
hotline,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, call me, I'll help.
Yeah, no, but I think that sounds very interesting because you're saying events are so important to the strategy that that seat is going to open up. And so it's important for professionals to just be confident of their role and of the importance of events and take that chance and really talk that language. That's what I'm hearing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes. And just to give you one example, and from just the recent marketing kickoff meeting that we've had at SAP, one of the um, one of the core goals is to create those memorable, great customer and brand moments. Because in a world where everybody's confronted with floods of information in 10-second snippets, it is hard to make the difference. And events are, by design, the one thing that stick, the one thing that create deep emotions. So it is no wonder, I think, that at the core of what we want to do in the future, those moments are supposed to be designed to stand out and be even better than, of course, other companies' great moments. But I found this really interesting that, in the marketing strategy, events and those corporate moments were especially mentioned. And I think it shows the importance that we as event marketers can bring to companies and their success.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think that's definitely very positive and a silver lining from the pandemic, right? What you talked about before, that idea that we, I guess, really figured out how important events are and emotions are, and kind of that brought it forward as a silver lining, really. So, want to just check on your kind of stress level at the moment. Are there any challenges that you're seeing ahead that are kind of making you nervous or keeping you up at night?
No, not really. I
Well, you
think
mentioned
I have a very positive outlook on events. So, like everything that would keep me stressed right now, wouldn't keep me up at night, is probably more related to something like a concrete business thing that's going on right now, but not necessarily about pessimism for the event tactic in the future.
it sounds like you're feeling very positive about it. You mentioned earlier, I think what was quite interesting, that you, one of the things that really kind of pushed you away from events initially was this idea of people being really stressed. Um, and of course, you've worked in all sorts of different roles around events throughout the years. Do you have any advice for those that are very stressed, or how have you coped with stress over the years that you've managed to survive, and then you're here having a great conversation with us?
Mhm. So I think one thing that a strategy that worked for me personally was um, to just decide to shut down. But I think it's something that worked for me. I don't know if that works for everybody, but I decided in very stressful times, especially back in the agency, that at a certain point in time, like I'd say, look, I'll just shut down my computer now and then go home and sleep and then come back in the morning refreshed and start again. Like, nobody's going to die if I don't send out this email tonight, and I'll take my time. So, but that was a deliberate choice that, for me, that worked for me. I don't think it goes for everybody. But I think as event planners, or managers, etc. Like we have a certain responsibility towards the people that work on our events. So on the other side, instead of just individual choices, we can also change um, the environment that people work in, right? So, for instance, what I've done, for example, in the past year is we've started a pilot with kind of a co-ownership, right? So um, we have on our team um, people working in part-time, and they constantly felt stressed because they need to leave at a certain point in time. They don't have the flexibility because they have, for instance, have to pick up the kids from the kindergarten, like, and they have to do that at 2 o'clock. So they can't just get it, stay on that call until 10 past 2, because then there's going to be a crying child, and well, you all know what's going to happen, right? So, but that this environment actually created that stress within in these people that we were looking at and trying to figure out in workshops with them, like how can we change that? How can we create an environment that makes you less stressed? And one of the things that we found was dual roles, right? So two people sharing one role with very clear very clear rules on responsibilities and how this responsibility would be handed over. But what that allowed was that one person knew, okay, like I'm shutting down at 2 o'clock, but my work's not going to stop, because from 1:30 to 2 every day I have this handover meeting with a colleague who's then going to take over and has the authority to make decisions. And then in the morning we'd like do the next handoff, or maybe in the evening. And I'm just going to run the morning shift, and the next person's going to run the afternoon shift. So I think there are very individual solutions that we can find. Those, I think, were just two versions of stress that we looked at. Like me personally, as a team for part-timers, there's also what is really, really important, and that can create stress, and we can very easily avoid that, is inclusion, right? So embracing differences, understanding of different languages, people, cultures, that create a work environment that by default is going to create less stress, because the job itself is stressful enough. So let's work on the environment and make that easier for everybody, and more favorable.
Yep. All great tactics, and thank you for sharing those with us, because I think that's something that comes up over and over again when it comes to event professionals. Matthias, we're coming to the end of the podcast. It's been a pleasure learning about your experience, learning about your view on innovation and AI and so many different things. So I really appreciate your time and being with us today. And I wanted to get the final question with you, or ask you the final question, which is really for you to recommend someone else that we should have on the podcast to have another conversation like this.
Mm-hmm. I have two people that I'd like to recommend. One is Ben Morson. He's a neuroscientist, and he's looking at engagement in events. I've had lots of conversations and interactions with him over the past year, and it's really impressive on how he thinks about events and people consuming events, and it's really, really always worth to have a conversation with him. And then the other person that I would recommend is, a fellow German, somebody who I've known for a number of years, and we've had like a similar career path, but he's really more into the execution of events at larger scales. That's Simon Dauenhauer from Roche in Germany. Really, really great, energetic character, who's looking at reinventing the way that Roche runs events in Germany. And again, coming back to the theme, not just as a standalone marketing tactic, but as part of an integrated part of the communications team.
I appreciate the two recommendations. I think they're both excellent, and we'll follow up on those. So thank you. Matthias, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for being our guest on the Skift Meetings podcast. And I wish you lots of success for the times ahead. And hopefully we'll catch up again soon and learn all about how you've integrated AI and all the great things that you're working on.
Thank you very much for having me again.